Unmute. Can you hear me now?
I think so. I gotta wait for the live stream to catch up, but
I have myself muted.
unmute.
I sound so crisp and clear.
All right. I think we're good.
Cool. All right.
Restart.
No.
You want to restart?
No, I'm not restarting.
Okay.
Okay, so like I said, you get to write Angular. It's flavorless Angular. Scully lives on top of your solution, and it's able to ascertain things about your Angular solution because of how opinionated Angular is. Because if you're using the Angular CLI, it's generating projects in a specific way, and Scully can figure that out, and you don't have to write anything specific to make Scully work really. So as I said, it's a simple integration into existing projects. You could take an existing Angular app, if it was version 8 or 9, and add Scully into it, and it would be able to generate a static site. There's a couple of extra steps that I'll talk about later that you would have to take to get it maybe to work with the entire thing, but for the most part, you can just add it into an existing Angular solution, and it's going to be able to generate and pre-render parts of your app. Scully gives you an opportunity to save money. As somebody who has never really delved into like how much it costs really to host massive projects or anything like that, the JAMStack as a whole is sort of a cheaper solution for a lot of people, where they don't have to host an application in IIS on a Windows VM and have to pay for the time for that virtual machine up. A lot of times you can just publish static sites. And so you can do that with an Angular application today. But what Scully does is it will make all the web requests on the server or wherever you're doing the build first and create renders of that ahead of time, just like your Gatsby or any other static site generator would do. So you might be able to save money by not hitting an API as much if you're paying for usage like that, or even time for CI/CD. There's a lot of different ways that you can save with JAMStack as a whole, and so Scully kind of gets us into that. We're also going to see improved SEO. Single-page applications aren't really known for being super SEO friendly, and that's just the nature of them. It's an index page with a div that's like your app root, and it depends on JavaScript to populate all that content. And so a lot of times crawlers will just see that, and they aren't able to index the content that's on your page. And if they make requests to specific pages, you kind of requires JavaScript to go in and populate stuff. So with this, you're going to have index pages, HTML pages full of content that your crawlers will be able to crawl. So you'll be able to generate a sitemap from that, or just give a crawler a starting point, and they'll just have at it. Be able to click links, get quick responses, and they'll give you good ratings on page load speeds because you're going to be getting a paint right away, and they're going to predict increased conversion rates because users on 3G will get really small hits very quickly. Your 3 megabyte app is now going to be an initial 10 kilobyte download. As a whole, it's going to be a better experience for their users. You're going to be able to get around your site faster because you're not going to be constantly waiting for that JavaScript resource to be served to the client in Bootstrap and Angular to take over. It's just going to be there, a pre-rendered version of what the app would be. Next, I think it's important to talk about why you shouldn't use Scully, or at least what's not great about it right now. I would be remiss if I didn't comment on the things that I've noticed already about Scully. So first of all, it's an early development. It's a pretty small team. There's like 3 or 4 people on the core team. They are, oh, thanks, man. Let me hide that. Perfect. They are, oh, shoot, now I just put it to sleep. I have a hotspot down there. Scully team is encouraging the community to come contribute, but it's not, they don't have like a defined roadmap or a massive issues list that would be easier to undertake. So it's kind of just waiting on that team to start to keep churning things forward and make stuff cleaner and better. What's up? Reshare? Yeah. Did it quit sharing when yeah, makes sense, I guess. That one. You're fine. You see? Next, my observations of Scully is that it's really slow right now. When you compare it to something like Gatsby, which can churn out a lot of pages very, very quickly, Scully is pretty weak at that right now, it seems. Even one of the main developers of this, Aaron, has said Scully might not be a good recommendation if you've got thousands of pages, because it's going to take over hour to build all those pages out. And I don't know if that's something that they're planning on working on or not, but it's just right now inherently slow. So that was just an observation of mine. And Like it could impact your decision if you wanted to use it or not. So because it's in such early development, it's a lot less feature rich than Gatsby or Gritsum or Next.js. And this is sort of just a symptom of it being a baby. Gatsby's had 2 years to grow and mature and have a very, very rich ecosystem of plugins. They have Gatsby Cloud now, and where Scully is just an NPM package that you install into your own project, right? That's all it is. There's not a ton around it. It'll take time, right? Small development team means that it's not going to evolve as quickly. I'm hoping that this isn't something that's driven based off of popularity. Like if they start getting more NPM installs, that they'll be able to afford to increase their team. I hope that they are going to be able to really increase the amount of bandwidth that's used to develop this thing so that it can grow faster. It's also got a lack of documentation. They don't even have an official site up yet. It's just all within GitHub. So they've got a GitHub repository, and their full documentation is just in GitHub. I think I heard on a show somewhere that they were planning on trying to release it middle to end of this month, which is also when their planned beta release is. So hopefully we start to see that soon, because I think that what's really important, especially for these JAMStack frameworks, which are meant to be really quick ways to get on the ground and running, is to have really good documentation. So let's talk about how Scully works. So under the hood, Scully uses Puppeteer, which the main feature of Puppeteer is it's basically a headless Chrome that runs with Node, and they are using it to crawl a single page application. That's essentially what they're using it for. And it uses some like machine learning tactics to learn about your app and learn about where some things are as well. I don't know how it works. It sounds magical, but Puppeteer handles a lot of that work. So there's two steps with how Scully does a build. The first thing is route discovery. So it attempts to figure out all the routes that exist within your Angular app. And it will dump those out into a little file called like Scully routes. And it's just a JSON object that has the slug, and then I think it's just the route name. I think that's all it is. And so once it knows all of the routes, and it's confident that it's going to be able to render those routes, it will traverse all of them and create renders of them all, which are just pre-rendered index HTML pages. So it does it on the fly. And what you're left with then is a public or like a static folder that's just got all of your JavaScript that you would have with your normal Angular app. And then index pages for each of the routes that Scully was able to figure out. So this is kind of like a little diagram that I made that illustrates just at a high level what it is. So on the left side, these are like what consists of your Angular app. You've got modules, components, services, assets, and you will run those through your normal Angular build process, which does all of like your ahead of time compilation and your tree shaking, blah, blah, blah. And once you have that build, Scully will then use that build to traverse the single page application and try to generate all the pages. So it's clearly it's something that runs after your normal Angular build. You would just add it as a new command in your pipeline if you wanted to. So what you end up with then is just the existing Angular app and then a static HTML. That's it. So it's an index page that has pre-rendered version of it. And when you click on it, you get hit with that content. And then that index HTML will make the request for the rest of the Angular files for the rest of your JavaScript. So it will still function just like a normal Angular app, but instead of Angular needing to do that first content reach, it's already going to be there. All right. So we're going to kind of dive into a little demo right now, right? So this is the command. That's all you need in order to add Scully into your project. This is a schematic. And so a schematic is basically just, it's like complex code generation, right? So this has got some, yeah, go ahead.
After you've created your Angular.
Absolutely, yes, you bet. So I've got an Angular app. Let me pump up this stuff here. I've got an Angular app that I made before I came here today. I spared you all the pain of watching me do that, or running a NPM install on these things because it takes a while. So this is the latest Angular 9, which is like RC9, I think. What's that? Last week? Yeah. So before last week, actually, Scully only supported Angular 9. I think they had a pull request that came in just a couple days ago that now supports Angular 8 projects. But Basically, this app, it's pretty simple. Let's go hit. Oops, not the right port. All right, so let me bump it up. So basically, there's a few different parts to our page. We've got a little home. We've got a heroes list, which this reaches out to a Marvel API and just pulls a list of comic book heroes. And then just some really simple pagination here. And then a hero detail page, which will have just some meta information about the heroes. Basically just the title and then a description talking about who the hero is. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So if we jump back into the code here, most of this I just generated with the Angular CLI. So I use the CLI to create the project. And normally what you would just end up with is like a very simple, your main app module, app component. And what I've gone ahead and done is I added just a header and footer. And the header and footer are wrapped or on top of this router outlet. And that's where we see that content. And so we've got a heroes page. And inside of that, we have a list of hero cards and then the hero detail page. Okay, it's pretty simple enough. Managing all that data, I wrote a hero service, which uses some reactive, some Arcs.js to just make those web requests. So that's all that's happening there. And then the hero list it basically just pulls an ID out and makes it request to the hero service to say, give me all of the details. Okay. All right, so right now it's just a fully functional Angular app. So what I'm going to do is run this command. I haven't tested this part yet today. So hopefully they haven't pushed any changes that broke anything.
That never happened.
It's happened a couple times when I've been watching presentations on Scully. They'd install it and be like, oh, this doesn't work. We broke it today. And then they'd bring somebody else in and be like, what's going on? They debug it live.
Does this just pull like the latest Scully, whatever they pushed? Like
So
latest production?
That's what it's doing right now. Well, this is a schematic. And so all it's doing is generating code.
They didn't specify the version, so by
Gotcha.
default, Cam will grab
Latest.
the tag latest.
So is Scully going to generate us a folder of static content that you could just drop out onto wherever then?
Yep.
Okay.
So when you run Scully after an Angular build, it will create a public folder or static
So you
folder.
have to, so it's a step. So you have to build it,
Yes.
then Scully.
You have to run the Angular build
Okay.
and then run Scully, and Scully needs that
So
build.
you can in your npm create a one-liner.
Absolutely. Yeah, you bet. So we run the schematic and it's done a couple things for us. It updated our package JSON, so it added a couple dependencies. It also added a thing that Scully needs within our app module. We don't really care about it right now. And then most notably, it creates this configuration file that's called the Scully config. And this is where a lot of the beef for the Scully project lives. Right now, it's got really nothing. And I'll talk about this a little bit later and we're gonna add to it. But for right now, we can run Scully, we can do the thing. So I'm gonna run the ng build and then we'll do an npm run Scully. I can run that because the schematic added this Scully command here. So we're going to do that. There is a watch for Scully, but it is very, very alpha. And they pretty much say don't use it yet because it doesn't work. So
It has that problem you mentioned earlier, that it's slow.
and yes, I've never tried it, but yeah, it would be.
Just generating the pages is offer slow.
Yeah, and what kind of sucks is it can't like figure out just changes. It will redo everything. So if you had a blog and you had 1,000 posts, and you made one, you have to redeploy the entire site, which makes sense though, because if you I guess only if you made a change to Angular, because if you make a change to Angular, all those hashes that are on the chunks get changed, and then all of your site has references to outdated JavaScript files. So you would need to rebuild and redeploy every index page so that it knows what the updated JavaScript is, right?
It sounds like something to want.
Yeah, it's kind of intuitive. Yep, it's the nature of a static site that uses like frameworks like that.
Can't exactly have an incremental build process quite the same as you can.
Yep. They've said that you can specify like give Scully a pattern. So And if you had maybe a catalog of blogs that went from like 2000 to 2020, and you made a change in the 2020 directory, you could probably feed Scully a pattern that would say only rebuild the ones that are here, or just go ahead and make changes to this one specific folder. I don't know how to do it, and they kind of seemed like, you could probably do it. So there's no examples of it. All right, so our Scully build, that's right. So our Scully build succeeded. Scully tells you what it's done. So in here, it does something where it imports the Angular build. And so within our, if I go up here and look in our dist folder, this Angular heroes directory is the default one that the ng build command does, or creates. The static is a new one. And Scully's gone ahead and it's copied all the files from Angular heroes into this, all right? And then it does a whole bunch of other stuff. So it tries to find a bunch of routes in the application. Let's see the ones that it found. I think that lives in here. I found 2 routes. I found homepage and the heroes page. Okay. I'll explain why it didn't find the other ones in a second. Let's see. Yeah, so right here. So it yells at me and says, I don't have any configurations for these routes. So there's something special about each of these. Each of these depends on a parameter to be inside of the route, right? It doesn't know how to satisfy this. It's like, what is a page? Colon page? I don't know what the heck that is. So we're gonna have to teach Scully how to do that page. And so Scully's gonna do that with a thing called plugins. So we're gonna be writing some plugins that allow Scully to behave the way that we want it to. So for now, it skips those because it doesn't know how to render those. It doesn't know where to get the data for that. So it goes ahead and it creates just the homepage and the heroes page. So I'm going to run just like a projects. I can't type. Yeah, no, you're fine. I'm going to run just an HTTP server, which is, there's nothing special here. It's just a node HTTP server, and it'll serve up files on my local machine. So this is our app that's been generated by Scully. So right now, I'll bump up the font and stuff here. Right now, it's still going to show in the network tab, like, hey, we've got the index page, but then there's all the JavaScript that comes in from the Angular app. I don't know if we can see that, but so let's go ahead and disable JavaScript. Thank you. So right now our total size is 3 megs. So I've disabled JavaScript now, and if we run this, then oh look, the biggest thing that comes in is my font file from Google, but our total size on our index page is only 7 kilobytes. And it looks the exact same way. And we can still jump to our heroes page. And I've got JavaScript that enables a class that gets rid of the opacity here. But this is the pre-rendered content that Scully went out and fetched for us and put into the HTML. Right? So now we just have the index page and then the images and our fonts. That's it. No JavaScript, but our app works. I don't think pagination will work because that depends on a parameter as well. What's that?
It doesn't know about.
Exactly. That's right. So we'd have to teach Scully how that works. So
back into it, no?
What's that?
I thought I actually loaded the app if you had JavaScript running still.
Yes.
I thought it actually.
It does. I have it disabled right now.
Got it. Sorry.
You're fine.
I'm just saying, like once it's up, if you're on that page and JavaScript's going like it normally would be, it will actually go to the next page, even though
yes.
Scully doesn't know statically.
That's right. Yeah. So the reason that is because what's that?
Hydrating.
Actually, Angular doesn't support hydration.
Okay.
It can't, and that's a whole different topic. But in this case, it's just like the index page hits, and then it makes the request for the JavaScript, and then after that, Angular comes in and bootstraps, and then it goes, "Whoa, I'm going to take over," and it becomes the normal Angular app that you normally would have, right? I'm getting timeouts, unauthorized requests on Marvel, so that might be fun to deal with in a little bit. I don't think I've hit my limit, but oh, it's because it's not from an authorized referrer. That's right. That's fine. No worries. Fix that later. Okay. So we're gonna go back to the presentation now. We'll come revisit this a little later. Cool? Does anyone have any questions so far? No?
seems not a question, but it just seems like audacious to have it as almost like an add-on rather than its own like foundation. So Gatsby is its own thing, and you build sites out of Gatsby, whereas this is just like a wrapper.
Yes, I think it's kind of, that's one of the appeals to it.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that they're trying to target a lot of places that have existing Angular apps, and they say, hey, you can get some benefits by using us right now. You know, if you've got an Angular app that's an e-commerce site, you can generate your product pages or your product catalog pages, product catalog pages as just static. And then, you know, you're going to have a person that's in a store looking at the product, and they go pull up your site, and it's going to load real fast because they don't have to wait for their crappy connection to load it. And
Everything on the CDN rather than on the actual.
that's right. Like if you want to do Gatsby, you have to port your app into a Gatsby app. You can't add it into an existing Create React app. So that's kind of one of the appeals here.
I wonder how hard that's going to be for them to do. Like, I wonder how many unknown variables there may be in an Angular app that they're trying to put this into. I wonder how hard that will be for them to overcome.
It kind of, I think it depends on how the developers made the app. Since this depends on like a lot of the scaffolding that the Angular CLI would do for you, it's kind of making that assumption. And so I think that if you went on your own and tried to just connect things together in a way that Angular, which it's highly opinionated, they say do things like this. If you don't do things like that, it might not work. But I think it's kind of smart enough to know, because it's got the build to know what things are connected where, and it's able to traverse the thing. So if your app works, Scully's probably going to be able to figure out most of the routes or some of the routes, but then you can teach it. So there's actually, I'll show you in a second. It's kind of cool. So we'll get to that in just a second though. So plugins are where the developer steps in with this really. So you have to teach Scully how your app gets data, and you do that through 3 separate ways. There are 3 different types of plugins that you can make with Scully right now. The first is a router plugin. So that's the one that we would need to make Scully recognize and render those missing routes from before. So a router plugin is used to discover data. You teach Scully, here's the place that you get the data from, and Scully will use that to go fetch the data for population when it's trying to make the routes. Second is a render plugin. This is used after the routes have been generated to transform the data. So this would be something like rendering Markdown. If you have a Markdown file, you could pass the content that's generated by Scully, which would just be like raw Markdown, through something like marked, and get your encoded HTML from the Markdown. You could do anything else with it. It basically just is a way you would pipe the index HTML, the entire thing would piped into whatever you wanted it to do, and you could do whatever you wanted with it. And then file handlers. So this would teach Scully what to do with specific file types. Scully has currently built in 2 file handlers. One's for Markdown and one's for like ASCII or something weird like that. I don't know what the use cases of it were, but those are the 2. Mike's just sitting out there. Is he gonna come in? Oh, he just came for the pizza. So yeah, you would essentially teach Scully. You know, if you had a CSV that you wanted Scully to do something with, you could tell it how to do that. And so Scully has a built-in plugin called the content folder, which has the ability to go to a place and pull files out of it. And then it will present it to you. And if it sees that you've defined a handler that says, oh, here's how you handle CSVs, the content folder plugin is going to be able to recognize that and say, oh, I'm going to hand that off now to your plugin, and you can do whatever you want with this file. So those are the 3 types of plugins that you'll be able to use with Scully. And in order to do that, we need to interact with this file earlier that we looked at called the Scully config. So these are all the bad boys that we have on the Scully config. The ones that we saw before were project root, like out directory, and then routes. Okay. That's all we really care about for right now. We're not going to really touch any others. Billy, to comment on one of your questions, there is this property here called extra routes. And here you can define routes that Scully, like that's outside of your Angular application. They say in their documentation that these could be like React routes. If there was a React app that was somewhere in your ecosystem, you could tell it about it, and Scully would be able to go into it and do stuff. It could be content from like jQuery, a whole bunch of stuff. They said you could do whatever you wanted using this. They don't have any examples, and I have no idea how it would be done, but they said, oh yeah, Scully will handle a whole bunch of stuff outside of just your normal Angular app. Big question mark. I don't know what it means really, but all right. So this is kind of what our Scully app or Scully config looked like after we initially generated the Scully. We ran the schematic, and it's pretty empty. It just says, oh, here's where your project root is, and here's where I want you to dump out all of the static stuff, okay? What we're gonna add is a route. We're gonna say, hey, Scully, here's a route for you, and we want you to use this plugin on it. And so in this example here, this is telling Scully about a post detail page, essentially, right? You have a route in your Angular application that's post/post/some ID. And then you specify, I want you to use this type of plugin. This is what that plugin might look like. And it's just JavaScript that you can put above the file, or you could put it in your own and just import it in. But there's a couple different parts that we care about. The first one is the actual registration. And so in here, it takes 3 parameters. The first is the name of the plugin, or the type of plugin. So there's 3 different types that we specified earlier. It's just a string that you would pass in. So it'd be like router, renderer, or file handler. The second type is the name of your plugin. And then the third is a function. So here's an example of what one of those functions might look like. So a plugin takes 2 parameters. It takes a route, which is basically just this. And it takes a config, which is this. Jump back into where we were. And it's going to expect that you return a promise of arrays, an array of what they call handled routes, which looks just like this. So it's an object that has an array of these things. Route as a key, and then some string value as the value. So this example here, it's making just a fetch request out to a JSON placeholder, and it maps the data, and it says, okay, let's return an array of these things. So it's just post/post.id.
Do you happen to know if those routes have to exist in your router within your application currently in order to work?
These ones do, because what Scully will do is when it does its initial route discovering, it will see that you've defined a route of post/post/post ID or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's going to later try to see if you've created a plugin that will match on that route, right? And so it's going to look towards, let's go look for something like this.
Create a plugin that doesn't match a route in your router file, but it's not going to do anything with it.
It's not going to, yeah, it's not going to have anything to do with it. So exactly right.
That's the answer to your question.
Yes.
I'm kind of curious though, like a lot of Markdown and Gatsby, you can just throw at the thing, but there's no router definition for this.
Sure. What we might do later if we have time is they've got a schematic for a blog, and it's kind of interesting to look at it because you'll create a blog that only works from Scully. It won't work when you run your normal Angular app. Yeah, so we could take a look at that. Cool. All right. And then the third thing that you need after you've defined the function is this thing called a config validator. The way they did this is stupid. I think very unintuitive. So it's JavaScript, so everything's an object. In this case, there is a property that lives on the function called config validator that you have to set. And it returns, it's like an async function that returns an array of strings that are error messages. So it's a config validator. That means that it's code that's going to run when a config value, this thing is passed into your plugin. So you can write a validator that says, hey, if you're trying to use my plugin, you need to make sure that your config includes all these things. And if it doesn't, I'm going to return a bunch of errors or whatever. So that's what that's used for. It's funny because every single time I've seen somebody demo creating a plugin, they don't do this. And they get an error message that they don't know what it means. And then they create the config validator and say, we need to get rid of this. This is stupid. Or at least get rid of the requirement for it.
So you have to list the empty one.
Yes, it's completely required. Scully will break if you don't have one for it. Yeah, it'll say, oh, you don't have a config validator for your plugin, so it doesn't work. Yeah. So that's it. That's all you need to do a plugin. So we're going to make our own now. Okay. All right. Yeah, this is going to be fun. I have some backup code in case I forgot how to do it. So
Is there a schematic to like start one?
you don't really need to because it's just a string, right? So so we're going to create a plugin that is going to be used to retrieve our detail pages for the heroes. How does that sound? Does that sound okay?
Yep.
All right, cool. So the first thing that you need to do is define a route. I think it's just the string value of the route. Let me look at what it's called. This guy. It's going to be heroes/hero:_ID. Heroes/hero:_ID. Okay. So we say, hey, for this route, we're going to do some stuff. And so we're going to create a type. And this takes the name of your plugin. So we'll call it Jam. Let's just call it something that makes sense. My hero plugin. All right. So that's it. If you try to run this, it's going to yell at you because it doesn't know what the heck that is. So let's just do it up here. Get a new function. And remember, this takes what? The route, the config. Call it my hero plugin. And this needs to return something. For the sake of what we need, I think there's an API for the Marvel thing that I'm using. They say, hey, if you're trying to request some data from a server, you need to include an MD5 hash that's composed of your public key and your private key. So there's a NPM client that does that for us. So I'm going to import that. So I think it's called, we have to require it in because this is Node Marvel API. Yeah. So we can create an API really quick by doing Marvel API.create client. And this takes, I don't know what it takes. Options. Key, I think, and then some private key. Share them with you. So I'll go get rid of them all afterwards. They're right here. I think they're actually in Git. So yeah, I did that on accident. What?
Did you get the beautiful Git robot right yelling?
No, that's a thing.
Keys.
I didn't know. That's really nice.
The dog and the key.
So I think that there is a, let's see, API dot, gosh, I don't know, characters dot take all. I can't remember. I'm gonna cheat. Are you okay with that?
In this scenario, cheating is allowed.
I have a branch that has the code in it in case I forgot how to use it. So don't peek. Create client. There's the thing. It looks like that. I'm gonna just copy paste it because it doesn't have anything to do with our app really. So in this case, all it does is it makes a request, and I think that we're asking for the first 100, and I think this is an offset, right? And then for each one, we're mapping that into this handled route, which says heroes/hero:_ID. So this should give us, it should be able to say, hey, Scully, here's 100 different heroes that you need to go generate pages for. Does that make sense? Yes, neat. Okay, great. So then we have to do the config validator thing. It'll take not that long. Maybe, I don't know. Honestly, I ran it on another, like a PC, and it took like 30 seconds, which I thought was pretty crappy, honestly.
Including the API call?
Yeah, it's really fast. The API calls very fast, though. They've got some good stuff on it. Okay, what is this? This is like an async thing. I think that's what it looks like. Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, so we've defined our plugin and we've defined our config validator. We should be able to run an ng build and then a Scully run.
Tell you're using the function within that expert.
Oh, thank you. I need to register the plugin. Yes. So what did this take? It takes the type, which is a render or a route, and it takes the name, my hero plugin, and then it takes your function. Just like that. Hey, that's a good call. I think I do. Gosh, you guys are the best. Yeah. So we're gonna import these two things. So we need a register plugin and then, oops, plugin. And we also need config validator as well. And those are gonna both come from Scully io/Scully. Methinks. What did I do wrong? Do you guys see something crazy? What's up? From. Thank you. All right. I don't think we can do this though. Can't. It's ES6. There we go. Okay. This should be everything. So if it doesn't break, that'd be freaking sweet. All right. This is from the build directory. Let's bump back over to here.
This isn't TypeScript.
I think you could do TypeScript. I'm sure you could. They generate the JavaScript file for you.
It's living in other lands.
I think that they're in their repository. They have it as the thing. Oh, what is going on here? Router. That's it. Yeah. The error messages are very unhelpful as well, except for this one. That one made sense. But let's try that again. I could probably omit the ng build since it's already there. And you can just run the Scully. You only have to redo the build if you changed Angular code. With this, the few amount of pages that we have, it is not terrible.
And your computer's not bogged down with corporateware, making sure you're not.
That's right.
Training data.
Let's check that out. Look at this. Look at all of the things.
Look at those 100 pages it's creating.
That's right.
100.
Seems like more than 100. All right. This actually wasn't terrible.
22 seconds.
But yeah, right. If you could, yeah, go ahead.
Where is the template for those pages? I missed that part. Like this is just creating.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I showed you that. It's just the component, right? It knows where to, because all it does is it will actually render it. It will come in here and pretend like it's, because it's using Chromium in the background, right? And so it is mocking. It's pretending to be a browser. Yes. And so it'll come in here and place the ID as hero 1. And then whatever Angular makes that template, it becomes your HTML. Yeah. So
it reaches out to your service and grabs the data.
You betcha. That's right. So I'm gonna look really quick inside of this.
More than one. It made more than one network call when using that. It got the
That's correct.
And then it got another network call for every page.
That's right. Angular made a network call to get the data. That's right. 101 requests, right? But the idea is you could write it in a way that your production app never has to make that call ever again.
Right.
Right.
Like
It will right now.
If your data doesn't change frequently or it's not dynamic, this is perfect.
Yes, exactly. So we can.
What percentage of sites are truly dynamic?
Mm-hmm.
Probably a lot less than these dynamic methods to generate them.
So now we see like a directory for each of these IDs, and each of them has just an HTML file. You could open it, right? But that's not how I want to open the file. Yeah, I want to just open this up in.
This JAMStack just took a turn.
This is what Scully spits out, right?
It was AIM.
So it took my global styles and threw them in here, so it doesn't have to make a CSS request. That's pretty cool. Let me see if I can find something in here.
Here's like what it does with like Angular material and things like that.
Yeah, I'm curious. We can mess around with it. So yeah, so our content is going to be in here somewhere. That's our footer. I don't know where it is. Whatever. This is the HTML page. It's got the content in it. Yeah. That's pretty cool. So now we've written a plugin that will do the thing that we wanted it to. Now we've taught Scully how to handle that route. And so you'd have to do that with all of the routes on your page if they had like parameterized routes, right? Which wasn't that bad. It's basically just a network request that returns an array and says, okay, here are all the things. Yeah.
So at this point, if you need HTTP server locally,
yeah, you can do it.
And you try to hit the next button to traverse into the next page, we're good?
Nope. Because I did not tell Scully how to handle the heroes list, right?
Okay.
So if you look at,
Yeah, if you go back into your console log, there should be
Yep.
complaining about
It did. I think I cleared it. Oh no, I didn't. It's up at the top.
Yeah.
So right at the top, I think that they should move this down to the bottom where it says we couldn't find these routes, but they say, hey, you didn't tell me how to handle this.
But it's now gone, so too.
But you know, I can't remember if I'm handling that with JavaScript or not. If it was just a router link, I would need this. But if I was just incrementing a thing and saying make the next request, then
I'm kind of curious about the router link part of it. If it's smart enough to say, yeah, I just dropped this ID in, but the router itself is all JavaScript, so that makes sense.
let me look. Yeah, I handled this with JavaScript. So as it is right now, if you had JavaScript disabled, pagination wouldn't work anyways. So I should probably just change this to a router link that is set to something that increments or decrements the page number. So you could just move back and forth.
Yeah. Even that would work though, like with JavaScript off. You know,
It should if you, oh yeah, I see what you mean.
because the like router.
We could test it.
Module.
We probably won't have time
No,
tonight,
it would probably end up creating a separate page with every
yes, you
value
got it.
for that
Yes, you're
route.
correct. You're correct. So if you told Scully, here are all of the pages, the hero pages that you need, and it was 1 through 10, it's going to render each of those individually, right? So page 3 would have 4 and 2 as the next and back. And so it would be able to navigate to /2 or
Right.
/3.
Clicking next and back
Yeah.
though, if it's a button click that
If it's a-
actually triggers a
You'll have to-
JavaScript.
If it's it would,
You
yeah.
have to redo the HTML so they're anchors.
See, but that's.
I think it would figure it out. I think if it was
anchors probably won't work.
I think if it was a router link, that's an anchor tag. I think that Scully would make that as an href. We could test it later, but yeah. Anyways.
It works in Angular, but it might not work
Yeah.
through this.
Cool.
Are the HTML files pretty minimal on JavaScript?
They do not they don't do any minimizing right now of the HTML. But you could write a post render, like a render plugin that did that. So you could we could write our own thing here that imported some npm package that its job to do is take HTML and minimize it, make it as efficient as possible.
Like it's that's probably a bad word.
No, you're fine.
But I mean, like all your JavaScript functionality you can do it doesn't import those into the raw.
It does.
Does it?
Yes, each of your generated HTML pages contains the script tags to make the request to get your JavaScript for your Angular app. So if I don't know if you were going here, but if you wanted to create a truly static site where it's just HTML and it doesn't pull in any JavaScript, you would have to write. There's no way to do that today. You would just write a like a render plugin that would just go through each of the HTML and strip out the scripts. You could do that.
That's almost like starting on the Gatsby side.
Yeah.
Where you're basically starting from nothing and building your own way.
That's right. Okay. Cool.
Fun stuff.
Fun stuff. I think we, yeah. So I guess I wanted to talk about transfer state really quick because it's kind of cool. Transfer state solves a unique issue that is, I don't think that Gatsby or anything else experiences this. I think this is a symptom of Angular not having hydration. Thank you. So transfer state is used to help prevent a content flash. And so what you see with like Angular Universal or even with Scully out of the box is your browser gets the HTML page and it paints it. And then what happens is Angular comes in and it bootstraps and it goes, ooh, I'm taking over. I don't know what all this crap already here is, and it will replace it. And so if there's any sort of like asynchronous call that's made in order to get the content, you're relinquishing control to the browser, which will go through another render cycle and there will be a paint. And so you've got index and then Angular comes in, gets the content, there's a new paint and it flashes and you'll see the screen like go white and repopulate really quick because Angular is replacing it. And so transfer state is their solution to this. And it's kind of an ingenious way. It's kind of annoying though, because you have to code your app in a specific way now to handle this. But this is what you can use to reduce HTTP calls in production apps. Because Scully will store the state of the page in the HTML. It'll take the JSON and it will throw it into just like a stringified version. And I think it stores it in the window. And then Angular can come in and you can say, hey, if the state's there, pull it out and use that instead of making a web request to get the data, right? it's kind of cool. So this is just an example of what it looks like. If you had some user observable, there's this thing called is Scully generated, and this just returns a Boolean. I don't know how this works behind the scenes, but it's exported from Scully.io/Scully. And this will return true if the thing that you're on was the page that Scully generated, right? So if that's true, there's this transfer state that you can import into your component, and you can get this user object. And so behind the scenes, this will take that stringified JSON, turn it into JSON, and pull this user object out of it. And you could use that instead of saying, all right, let's make a request to the API to get the user object. So in this case, if Scully generated is false, then they make a web request. So this would happen if Scully was doing generation. It says, oh, we don't have this state yet. We need to go fetch it. And so it will go grab the thing and then set it in the state. And then what you end up with is the thing in the HTML, which is just the stringified JSON of the object that you wanted there, right? So you would add this to any place in your app that you didn't want to help reduce this flash. I don't think it technically would, or not in all situations. It's not cure-all, but and then to produce HTTP requests. Yeah. So it's kind of cool. But all right, does anybody have any questions? Anything that they want to revisit? Because that's all I got for you. I don't know anything else. I'm just kidding.
So we talked a little bit about it doesn't actually rehydrate. Is that kind of because of this scenario? What does that mean to you when it doesn't rehydrate?
I think it is. I don't think that Angular can support hydration.
Okay, that's my understanding as well.
Yeah.
I was wondering with the Scully piece having static.
Yeah, no,
Bringing that back.
same issue. I think this is kind of like a hacky way of trying to do it, but instead of the server hydrating, it's the client hydrating the client. But yeah, Angular, I don't think could the way that it's written.
I'd be curious also, like when you're using this transfer state, if you get into like an NGRX or some sort of state management on that side of it too.
Gets goofy.
Yeah,
I bet.
like you're real weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool.
But I haven't played around with it in depth enough to tell you what the behavior would look like at that point. Yeah.
This is really neat that you can straight out of a Angular app, no thoughts, no like Gatsby, nothing on the side, just kind of start down this course. It's pretty awesome.
It's a neat offering that kind of differs.
Like you'll probably have like you might have 30 meg or whatever, 30 meg a lot, but a large application loaded for an Angular site or a spot, a true spot situation. But I feel like all of these pages, you'll probably end up with a large chunk, so you'll end up probably more on your hosted version of it. But it should be.
Why do you think that?
For each. Just depends on the JavaScript required within that component piece. So you might end up with more. Like right now, like those 100 pages, right?
Yeah.
They all require the same global styles, so you'll have to repeat those X, Y, Z, I guess. I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, they all would require the same resources, right? And so they're only. It's no different than like visiting a page and refreshing. I think your browser would cache the static thing, and it would be a much smaller payload.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But if you went to an index page that required like a lazy loaded component that you didn't have before, then it will make the request for that chunk, and then hopefully your browser caches it, unless you have a weird cache policy on those files. But yeah.
Have you messed around at all with like lazy loaded routes?
That's what these were. All these things were. Yeah, check this out. So I guess I didn't mention it, but let me go to the app component. So these guys were the home and the heroes module were lazy loaded.
That's awesome.
And it's the new. I like this so much more than their old nasty version. But
you can actually navigate to the modules instead of
that's right.
Crazy string hashtags.
Yeah. So yeah.
That's much better.
Mm-hmm. So what you'll just end up with then here is the home index page won't include the JavaScript to this, right? The heroes one would, and then that's essentially it. Yeah.
I guess that totally makes sense if it's just ripping through the router anyways. The router knows all this stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's pretty clean, but cool. Yeah. Does it? I'd provide 2 links. What's up?
We don't need to see the 100 heroes.
Oh, did you want to see the 100 heroes? We already saw them, but what do you want to see? You want me to spin it up?
Them one by one, correct?
I will go through each one of them.
I really would like to see you page draw.
Did I nuke it? Here we go. It's what was it? What port? I forget. 8080. Whoop. 3D Man. So this is the one that Scully did, right? The Absorbing Man. I don't know what these IDs are not super incremental, so I don't know if I had these because I only pulled 100. Yeah, this was only got a take for 10. That's right. Yeah. I could increase that take limit, but it's just in the service that makes this request. But you could do it here if you wanted to or something like that. So yeah. Okay.
Nothing online. Anybody got questions online before we kill the live broadcast? Parker says thanks all. I don't know.
You mentioned this is like a project that some Googlers came up with.
Some Googlers.
Or like what's the
like Jeff doesn't work.
Nope.
Google.
I don't. Aaron doesn't either. Yeah.
For
Google funded part of the development for Scully.
Okay, gotcha.
I don't know what that means for those employees. I don't know if they're hired by Google or anything, but I think Google gave them money and said, go use Angular to build a generator.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's at least enough interest in it that way.
Yeah, I think that their idea is they really hope that it catches on, so they keep doing the thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Like Gatsby is so community driven,
Yeah.
and the community is what sort of brought that up and allowed them to invest a ton of money into it. And so I think that they're hoping the same thing for this. But we'll see. The Angular community is a little bit weirder. It's very enterprisey and just full of people that aren't like, ooh, front end development. If you know.
Shiny type
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Cool.
I'll post a couple links. This is to their Scully GitHub, and then this is to my deck if you're interested, because I used a cool thing to make it with.
So as you know, I posted early on Scully.io blog, but I like this format, so I think I might have to have you guest author.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. I'll do that for you. All right.
Sweet.
Cool.
Thanks everybody online. We'll catch you on next JAMStack.
Bye.